Welcome to the next installment in my video lecture series for Principles of Microeconomics. And in this particular video lecture, I'm going to go over the welfare effects of a price ceiling. So if we take a look at what we have right here, I just have a market that is in equilibrium. And as you remember, we have a downward sloping demand curve, we have an upward sloping supply curve, and where the demand and supply curves intersect one another gives us the equilibrium price. And in this case, for these supply and demand curves, the equilibrium price is equal to 5. The equilibrium quantity is also equal to 5. And this is oftentimes referred to as the market clearing price. It's referred to as a market clearing price because this is the price where the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal to one another. We do not have a surplus and we do not have a shortage in the marketplace. So starting from that equilibrium, we can take a look at what is consumer surplus. And as you should remember, consumer surplus is the area above the equilibrium price but below the demand curve. So that blue area is the measure of what consumer surplus is. And producer surplus is the area below price but above the supply curve. And that gives us the red area, which is the producer surplus. And if you add those two together, you will get the total surplus. So make sure you remember the total surplus is just producer surplus and consumer surplus added together. So if we add those two together, that gives us a measure of the total surplus in the marketplace. So we have this market that's in equilibrium, and let's assume that the legislature, a government body, etc., decides that this price of $5 here is too high for whatever reason, and they decide that they are going to institute a legally mandated maximum price. And a legally mandated maximum price is a price ceiling. So let's assume that the legislature passes a law that the maximum price that can be charged for this particular product is $3. So I will label that the price ceiling. And let me just say P ceiling. And let me make that a little bit bigger so that you can see it. And I should probably also, wow, look at that. It did make it smaller. Sorry for this little bug here. Thought it wasn't putting in the subscript, but evidently it put it in the middle. So let me fix that for you. Sorry for the little delay here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So the price ceiling is $3. So the legislature has passed a law stating that the most that you can pay for this particular product is $3. What is going to be the impact of this in the marketplace? The easiest way to do it is just to follow the price ceiling price, the line for it. And what do you hit first? The first thing that you hit is supply. So at that price ceiling of $3, if we go from that point straight down, that will give us the quantity supplied at that price. So let me put a line in here for that. Change it to a dotted line to make it a little easier to see. Let me put this one. That looks a little bit better to me. So at that price, quantity supplied is going to be equal to 3. So in order to make a determination of what the quantity supplied is, just follow the price ceiling along. The first thing that you will hit is the supply curve. Going straight down will give you the quantity supplied. So QS is equal to 3. If we continue along the price ceiling, and we will eventually hit the demand curve. So we have the price ceiling, we hit the demand curve. If you go straight down from there, you will get quantity demanded. So if I go from there straight down, that will give me the quantity demanded. And let me group those together just for illustrative purposes. Okay? So we follow the price of 3, the price ceiling, till we hit the supply curve. If we go straight down, that tells us quantity supplied is equal to 3. If we continue along the price ceiling until we hit demand, and then we go straight down and we see that the quantity demanded is equal to 7. So the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. So that means that we have a shortage in the marketplace. And the shortage is going to be the difference between the quantity demanded of 7 and the quantity supplied of 3. So that will be a shortage of 4 units. So let me draw that in for you. And let me do it here, make it easier. And do it here also. Oh, wrong one. Let me put a little arrow to make it easier for everybody to see. I'll do the same thing here. There we go. And let me put a text box in here. So we're going to have a shortage, and that is going to equal 4. Don't want to do that. Come on now. There we go. Come on. I'll put it in the middle. As you can see that this program, it can be a little bit buggy. Let me actually just increase the size of it, and then maybe it'll be easier for me. And I guess I should spell it right too. That would be very helpful, don't you think? If I could spell things correctly. So here is the shortage. Now come on. Wow, this is really starting to bug me. There you go. So the shortage is going to be equal to 4. Apologies for that. When you move text around in this program, sometimes it tries to coordinate it with other lines and sometimes moves it around when you don't want it to, as you've seen here. So make sure you realize that the shortage is just going to be the difference between the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied. So 7 minus 3 is equal to 4. Also, let's take a look at what is going to be the welfare effects. And when I say welfare effect, what I'm saying is what's going to happen to total surplus, what's going to happen to producer and consumer surplus. The way you do that is that at the quantity where the price ceiling hits the supply curve, move that line. Whoa, let me get out of here. Not what I wanted to do. Let me draw in a new line. I'll connect it here, bring it up. So for that quantity, just make sure you go vertically all the way up until you hit the demand curve. And let me group those together. So this is how we can analyze what's going to occur. The first thing you should realize is that the 2 triangles that we see here, the blue triangle, the smaller one that's touching the original equilibrium point, and the red triangle that's touching the equilibrium point, those no longer are going to exist. The reason being is that people used to be able to buy 5 when the market was allowed to operate without intervention, and now only 3 units are being produced and consumed. Therefore, units 4 and 5 are no longer going to generate producer and consumer surplus. They are producer and consumer surplus that no longer exist. And by definition, that is the deadweight loss that we are going to see in this marketplace. So let me make this gray. So we have this area here, which is consumer surplus that used to exist, that does not exist anymore. And this area here, which is producer surplus that used to exist but does not exist anymore. Both of these areas are deadweight loss. So these gray areas are the deadweight loss, and I guess to illustrate this, I'll put a box here colored gray. That's not what I wanted to do. Let me do that again. And we will say that that's DWL for deadweight loss. And let me increase the size of that for you so it's easier to see. So we have deadweight loss here and here. And let me group those together. So those are, that gray area, those two triangles, are areas of producer and consumer surplus that no longer exist because production has fallen from 5 to 3 because of the price ceiling. Now, also, we have to account for another area. Remember, the price ceiling is below the equilibrium price. So with a lower price, the consumers that can still purchase this product are going to generate more consumer surplus because the price has fallen. Remember, consumer surplus is the difference between the maximum somebody is willing to spend and what they actually spend. So if I'm before, when the market was equilibrium, I was subtracting 5 off the maximum price. Now I am only going to be able to subtract 3 off of that maximum price. So each unit that actually gets consumed is going to generate $2 more of consumer surplus for every unit that is being produced and consumed. So what I'm going to have to do is to go into this area here, and let me change the color of that. Well, it's gray. Let me change it after I do it. Let me go back here. Sorry. What am I doing here? I changed this to blue. I didn't want to change that to blue. I forgot that I had it highlighted. There we go. So, let me just do that again. Again, apologies. It's been a while since I've used this program, so I'm a little rusty in using it. So let me highlight that area that used to be producer surplus, but now has been converted to consumer surplus. So this area here is now consumer surplus. So if you remember, the original area of consumer surplus was this. We had to subtract off the deadweight loss, and now this area has been added to the consumer surplus. So you see that area that I have highlighted, it used to be producer surplus, but now because the price has been legally lowered to 3, it is going to generate additional consumer surplus, but because the price has fallen, that is taking away from the producer surplus. So make sure you realize that number one, that what happens when you institute a price ceiling, that a shortage occurs, and how you get the price ceiling. You just find, you know what the price ceiling is given in the problem, but if you need to find the quantity supplied, you just follow that price ceiling along until you hit the supply curve. That gives you quantity supplied. And then to find quantity demanded, you just keep following the price ceiling until you hit the demand curve and go down. In this instance, quantity demanded is 7. Quantity supplied is equal to 3. You subtract that 3 away from the 7, and that gives us the shortage of 4 units. Also realize now that because production and consumption has fallen from 5 to 3, consumer and producer surplus will be decreased from this because this 4th and 5th unit do not get produced. Therefore, consumer and producer surplus cannot be generated for items that aren't produced and aren't consumed. So that area here, these two triangles that I talked about, are the deadweight loss from the imposition of the price ceiling. And then finally realize that this area here now becomes consumer surplus. It becomes consumer surplus because consumers are made better off because the price falls from 3 to it falls from $5 to $3. So the individuals who can still purchase this item at $3 are generating additional consumer surplus. On the other end of this, the producers are made worse off. Remember, this was the original area of the highlighted large triangle here, was the original area of producer surplus. We lose this area here, the bottom part here being the deadweight loss. This is producer surplus that used to be generated. And this area here is now consumer surplus.